Welcome to the Back to You podcast. My name is Ann Baxter, and you're joining us for episode 4, where my husband John and I have been sharing our story of our journey through COVID, where he was hospitalized. And if you've missed the previous episodes, you'll want to listen to them first before you jump into this episode. This episode is a little bit longer as we wanted to wrap up this series and also answer some questions that some friends of ours sent in, things that they were wondering about. So we hope that you have enjoyed hearing the intimate details of our journey, and our hope is that it has encouraged you in some way. We are beginning this episode with John still being in the ER. He's been in the ER for 24 hours, and the hospital doesn't have room for him. And so there was talk of them transferring you to another hospital. And here at home, I'm, frantically trying to research hospitals. I had some help from a couple friends, just wanting to know which hospital I would approve if they wanted to transfer you. And at some point, our pastor, Tim Dunn, and our friend asked me if I would be open to him sharing about your journey with our church, which our church was in the middle of. Actually, it was at the beginning of 21 Days of Prayer. And twice a year, our church prays for 21 days. We just seek the Lord and ask him to show up in our lives in different areas. And we ironically were at the beginning of that, and he asked if he could share that with our church. And so, sure, my heart was for you to be healed, and I was in agreement with him reaching out. And I think automatically my mind shifted to, well, why wouldn't I reach out on social media? It was a platform that we had available to us to get that request out to a lot of people. And I felt like the Holy Spirit just said, if I'm not willing to reach out on social media, it would be, pride on my part and probably fear of just how people, probably judgment of people for my post. And just with there being a lot of controversy around COVID, I had seen social media be a platform of division over the last year and a half. And I had a lot of fear going into it, of the judgment that we might have. But I decided to reach out, and honestly, the response by our Facebook community or social media community was just really overwhelming. Thousands of people were praying for you all over the globe and at all hours of the day. I was just so overwhelmed by their response. And I know that the church in general gets a bad rap, that a lot of times, it's rightfully so. We're filled with broken, sinful people, and we just all need a savior. But honestly, I don't know how I would have done it, how I would have gone through what we went through without the church, without our wonderful group of friends. They really carried us through this experience with their prayers and the love that they showed to us. And looking back, God was using this situation to encourage and strengthen so many people that heard the story or our story was shared with, and so many people partnered with us in prayer. And that was just kind of bizarre for us, just how many people reached out and shared their experience or how it had impacted their lives. It almost felt like it was your funeral with you still being alive. And I'd just be curious, John, for you, what was that experience like for you?
That was incredibly humbling, and it still is. So many people have supported us and helped us during this season, and it's way too many to list. I could never thank everybody enough, I don't think, and I still cry probably almost every day, just out of thanks and gratefulness for what God's given to me, and gratefulness for the people that surrounded us, And so many people sent cards or messages or phone calls or Marco Polos that really in those first couple weeks that I got home is when that stuff all started to come in. And I did have the unique experience of people literally sharing with me either in person, like they would drive here and stand outside and talk, or they were on the phone or in their written words. They shared the things that would typically be said at your funeral, and only your family and friends would be able to hear that. And I got to hear what they had to say. And to all of you that wrote or called or messaged, I can't thank you enough. I really can't, because you've given me a gift that very few people ever receive. And I don't have the words strong enough to express my gratitude for that. And I saved all those cards, all the letters, all the messages. They're too much for me to read right now. And I know I'm going to revisit them at a later time. But I can tell you when they arrived, that was exactly what I needed right then to be able to press on, because I might have been alive, but there was still a lot more to overcome. And if I'm honest, I feel like there's still a lot more to overcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think in thinking about it, I just wondered if when people thought they would lose you, they started to think about the impact that you had had on their lives. And so as you started to make it out, the messages just started to really stream in. And I was just thinking about all the messages. I mean, there were messages coming from people all over the world. Some of them, Google Translate was having to translate them. The network that we found on social media was amazing, and it was connecting us to people that we hadn't been connected to prior to this. And it was just a great way for me to be able to update people on your status and give people specific ways on how to pray for you. And so what I did was I just reached out and asked people to pray for you to get a room to get out of the ER. And miraculously, you were moved out of the ER and into the I think it's PCU. What is it? Progressive Care Unit. And that had a long wait list. And so I just know that was the Lord taking care of you. And it was the place that you needed to be to start recovering. And I think it was once you got into that unit that you started to take a turn for the better. Is that what you would say?
I would say that the ER is probably where I feel like I took the biggest turn. I felt like I was quite literally on death's doorstep and moved back into life. So for me, that was by far the biggest turn, was in the ER. And then I think once they had me stabilized and they agreed he's probably going to live, is when they moved me up to the PCU, which was a godsend. They almost moved me to a different hospital, but God used Mandy, who came to visit me, who was working there, to keep me at St. Luke's East, which was close to home. And I just got to say, that was the place that I feel like I received probably some of the best hospital care I've ever experienced. And I was thankful to be in a room that was built for recovery, not for triage and trying to just get you out of your worst circumstances. And, I had great nurses, great CNAs. They just had a great staff there. And so big shout out to St. Luke's East. And I'll tell you, there's one name that I remember very clearly, and his name was Eddie. And this was the guy that worked in food service. And the way I worked there is you had to call a certain number, and you had to give them your name, your room number, and then you ordered the food that you want. And over my time there, once I was able to eat again, I basically built a relationship with this guy, Eddie, who I've never met. So if you know Eddie that works in food service at St. Luke's East, I want to buy him a meal, because this guy took great care of me and got to understand some of my situation. And there were times that they would put me on what's called NPO. And I really don't know what that stands for, but it just means you can't eat or drink anything. And the nurses started giving me a heads up of, hey, you're going to be on NPO tomorrow for the next 8 or 12 hours. And so the meal before that, I would call Eddie. I'd be like, Eddie, they're putting me on NPO. And, oh, no, not again, John. He's like, are they ever going to figure this out? I said, I don't know, man. And of course, I have my Darth Vader voice at that point. And so he was good to be able to understand me. But what he would do, he was like, hey, let's get you some foods that are either prepackaged or send you some fruit that I'll send it with this, we called it my last meal before the NPO went into effect. He's like, that way you have some food sitting there that whenever they finish whatever test, usually it was some sort of blood test or something that they were going to do on my liver, that way you have some food right there. You can just start eating and then call me up, man. I'll get you food as quick as I can. And it was just stuff like that, people took really good care of me. I felt like I was more than just this guy named John in room 417. And I love that it had a window. That was a huge deal to me to be able to have a window. And I know these are lots of facts and little tidbits, but they're things that were super important to me because when I was in the ER, I didn't know if it was day, I didn't know if it was night, I didn't know what was going on. And I had a window and it had shades. And when I first got in there, the nurses went over to try and close it and I stopped them. And I don't think they could understand me, but they came back and I was like, please leave them open. And they're like, you're going to need to rest. I was like, it'll be just fine. Because I was so thrilled to see daylight and to see trees and not be in this like sterile environment that there was the ER. And, I think back through being in the PCU and like they were trying to rehab my lungs. I had these exercises that I had to do and still doing multiple labs a day trying to figure out what was going on with my liver and still not getting a lot of sleep. And so I was able to coordinate with the nurses, which I will say does seem a little backwards that the patient had to figure this part out, that somebody was coming in my room like every 2 hours. And finally I asked the nurse, I said, can we coordinate everybody to come in at one time? And that allowed me to get several hours of sleep. And they kept me there really, my lungs healed pretty fast. My kidneys started to turn around fairly quickly, but my liver was the big issue. And, they just had to keep trying to figure it out. And while I was in the PCU, it just kept getting worse. And they took me off all the meds and I was down to, I think they were giving me vitamin C was the only thing that they would give me. But I do remember I got to the point that I could stand up. I was still a fall risk. And so they would help me on occasion. And then they finally gave me license where I could move around just a little bit. And this was after I'd been there several days, but that window was super important to me because I could see trees outside. But then we figured out that I could see the highway from my window. And you and I were talking on the phone and you had said something like, I'm getting ready to drive by. And I can still like plain as day see this in my mind's eye of watching our van drive by. And I was like, there you go. And so that window really became a lifeline for me because once we figured that out, then we figured out where that back staff parking lot was. Mm-hmm. And so you and the kids would come over and I could see you from my window.
The van's kind of easy to pick out since it's celery green. But, it was really difficult for us to know that you were so sick and for us to not be able to see you for that long, to not come in and be able to comfort you in any way. And I loved being able to stand down in the parking lot and see you from your window. Even to see you standing was just really a blessing. And I think for the kids, it was kind of a relief for them to be able to see that you were making a turn. The last time we had seen you was 8 days prior to that. Mm-hmm. And you were just in a really bad place. And so we were thankful to see that you were improving. And I think once you started to improve, then you started having a difficult time being at the hospital. I remember talking you down.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because now I think back and I can see it for what it was. Like for me to get over to that window, which was probably not even 20 feet, I basically have to take a nap after getting over there and waving to you and then having to go back. But I remember telling you, I think either on the phone or on Polo, I was like, I feel like a caged tiger. I was like, I feel so much better. And I don't know why they're keeping me here. I'll heal faster at home. And I was ready to do so much in my mind, but I wasn't paying attention to the facts that I was still sleeping probably at least 18 hours a day at that point, that I didn't pay attention to the fact that I wasn't reading. I couldn't listen to music. I couldn't watch television because my brain had taken such a beating from the illness that it was too much stimulation. I think it was probably just 2 days before I came home, I was able to finally listen to music and then turn on the television. And outside of that, I could message a little bit on my phone. But still, they weren't releasing me, and I was able to have good conversations with the doctors, which once I got home, I found out they still weren't telling me everything because I was able to get in my medical records, and they started getting real with me on what was going on with my liver. And when I started hearing the words transplant and biopsy and stuff like that, that's when, I was kind of keeping up with them and we could talk a little deeper, but it was scary.
Yeah. Well, then the nurse had said to me, we see elevated liver numbers with COVID patients, but that yours were double what the highest elevated numbers were. And so we were just kind of like, what is this? I remember having that like holding your breath feeling where you were like, oh man, was there something underlying, that's causing this? What does the future look like? And one of the numbers that you had that's like normally 40 to 60 range was at 1400, and it kept climbing. And so they had scheduled you for a biopsy. This was day 9 that you were in the hospital. And I just asked the Lord, I was like, if he needs the biopsy, then, please have them go through with it. But if he doesn't, will you put a stop to this? And I remember praying that prayer a lot of times when you were at the hospital. I know there were experimental drugs that they were considering using on you. And I just said to the Lord, if John needs those drugs, please have them give them to him. Because some of them were for people that had brain tumors. They were just trying things. And, but I just asked him, like, protect John from anything, any treatment that's not going to be good for his body long term. And so that morning, you were scheduled for your biopsy, and they got your blood work back that they had taken in the middle of the night, and it had finally plateaued. And they said, you know what? We're not going to do the biopsy. We're going to just take a less aggressive approach to your treatment, and we're going to just discharge you. And it happened so fast. Probably within 30 minutes, they had decided they were going to discharge you, and you were discharged.
Yeah, I think they actually had a couple sets of labs come in that the doctor was watching, and I plateaued. And then one of the numbers they started to drop slightly. And that was what he wanted to see, was that it wasn't going to climb anymore, because he was afraid it was going to plateau and then go up again. And mine plateaued and went down. And so, yeah, my memory's still pretty terrible. But I don't think I can ever forget when the nurse walked in and said, "You're going home today?" And I was like, "Don't mess with me." She's like, "No, look, I got all your papers right here." I was like, "So I'm good?" She's like, "No, you're not good." She's like, "But you're good enough to go home, and we're going to get you out of here. And we're going to have to monitor your liver." And so the gastroenterologist came in and talked to me about what that would look like moving forward. Gave me his phone number and said, call if you have questions. And basically once I got home, I was doing labs. I don't know how often.
Every couple days. Yeah,
every couple days, I guess. And couldn't drive, so you had to drive me because I could barely even walk to the car. But I was so grateful because I did not want that biopsy, because I told him, I said, "How do you biopsy a liver?" I didn't really want to hear the answer to it. And thankfully they don't cut you wide open, but they have this long needle that they poke into your abdomen and take a section of your...
Oh, a little plug.
Yeah, they take a section of it out and then go check it out. And so I was praying against that biopsy too, and was so excited when we didn't have to do it. And it was so good to get home. I know I was super weak. I could barely walk from the car. I couldn't even... I think there's one step to get into the back door, and you were having to really help me along. And there's nobody else here, because it was basically... They said, "You're going home," and literally... I called you, and by the time you got there, which is not even 10 minutes,
they already had you down at the front door.
Had me down in a wheelchair, which I think the nurse was joking. She's like, "You want to walk down?" And there's no way I could have done it. But I was excited because it was a school day.
No, it wasn't actually.
It wasn't.
It was the day before school, and the kids were at an event at school, like an open house.
Oh, all this time I thought, okay, there's the memory. Okay. Anyway, the kids weren't here.
Yeah, they were.
I remember that I made it here. I don't remember if I slept or not, but I remember I was on the couch when they walked in, and they were I was excited to see them. I was super excited to see them. And they were so excited, and it was interesting to watch their faces, especially having 5 kids. They're coming in single file and didn't know I was here. So some of them were playing around outside, and like the first one walks in and this huge face of excitement, and then I wouldn't call it horror, but it was like really disconcerted. And because I think they were so excited, like, you're home. And it was literally every one of them did the same thing. They'd walk in smiling, and then they would stop and just look at me and not cry, but it was not good. And they started, I think they thought I was going to come back healthy and whole and be who I was prior to COVID. And really, I was just a dude that had lost a lot of weight and was barely alive at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we were all just feeling kind of torn. We were thrilled to have you home, but then there was just an unsure feeling that came with it of who we were getting back. The person that we put in the hospital was in really bad shape. And, I think it was just a lot. It was unsettling to, get weak and sick John back and just not know what the end of the story looked like. I think there was part of you being in the hospital that was a relief for me because it took some of the responsibility of me making decisions and having to care for you off of my plate. I had gotten COVID last, so I was on, maybe I was less than a week into having COVID when you came home from the hospital, and I was still in like a extreme fatigue stage of COVID, and I was just concerned, I think, that I wouldn't be able to care for you guys, the family, like you needed me to. And the kids were starting school that next day, and I just loved, Jenny had been just fervently praying that you would be home in time for them to start school, and really it looked like it wasn't even a possibility. And just how the Lord discharged you so fast, the day before the kids started school. I just love to, make a little mental note of how much God loves us and how much He's in the details of our lives if, we allow Him to be. And so I think this was really important for the kids because they were starting a new school. 4 of the 5 were starting a new school. And I know that especially Jenny, but I think they all just needed the security of knowing that you were home. It gave them what they needed to be able to then start school the next day. And the John that we got was a very sleepy John.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I think I just moved from the bed. My big adventure would be to go out to the couch. And I just had to sleep in different locations. But I even did that in my hospital room. I got tired of sleeping in that hospital because it would inflate and deflate. And I remember one of the funny things, I had moved. There was like a couch that kind of pulled out into a real narrow bed. And in the middle of the night, I couldn't sleep and my body was aching. And so I moved with a blanket and a pillow over the couch. And the lady came in at like 3 a.m. to do my labs and couldn't find me. Like, she came in and the bed was empty. And so she turned on the lights and was so shocked to see me over there. And she asked, like, "What are you doing over there?" I said, "This is way more comfortable in that bed." And she's like, "Okay." And she turned the lights off and...
Stop panicking now.
Yeah, and then the nurses, when they came in the morning, they're like, "Well, yeah, you spent a week and a half in that hospital bed. I said, "I'm just tired of it." And I had less machines hooked to me now, so I was a little more mobile, and it was easier for me to get over there. And so they went and got sheets and comforter and pillows, and that's why I say the care that I received there was just really good and meaningful to me. That because they knew, like, that's what you do is when you're recovering from COVID, you're sleeping a ton, especially with what my body was going through. Mm-hmm. And I was grateful for it. But even whenever I got home, I think the first several weeks I was home, it really just seems like days to me because I think I was sleeping most of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you definitely slept a lot. What I remember is that when you were awake, it was just really bizarre because you would text me and you would say, "Hey, can you come in here? I don't want to be alone." And
yeah, Yeah, which I know I've brought that up a lot but I mean, you're on a COVID floor in the hospital. Like, you don't get visitors. Nobody's coming to see you. And anybody that does is all decked out in all their protective gear. And most of them there to poke you or prod you or do something that's their job to do, which is for your benefit. But it gets super lonely. And I think about like zero physical touch. Because everything is with gloves or it's an instrument. And so even just to be able to sleep in my own bed, but then to have you next to me and be able to put your hand on me or just be close to somebody. Even our kids, would come sit next to me on the couch and just snuggle up. And I know they wanted a lot of it, and I couldn't get enough of it. And it really showed me like how depleted your tank can get in different areas. And yeah, I was in a completely different mental and emotional state. Definitely whenever I got home.
Yeah. Yeah, you were constantly hugging, and this isn't really your nature, and so it was wonderful. I loved it, because we were so happy to be back together. But it was still a little bit unsettling at the same time. I felt a little bit nervous, not knowing, would it always look this way? Just the amount of emotional input that you were needing. It was a little bit exhausting. And I remember sharing it with a friend, and he said that, he's seen similar things. People go through similar things, and that they do come out changed. And so I had to really wrestle with that, just kind of surrendering to the Lord what the future looked like, and trusting that God would change, you and I both on this journey, and to not worry about what the change would look like. Just trust that he would be, in those details too.
Yeah, and I would say I feel like I've changed a lot. Well, I know my health has changed a lot for the better in the past, several weeks, months now. But even as a person, I was sharing this. We had a pastor meeting recently where I shared some of the learnings that I had, and it was like I've learned the value of slowing down, because I can't go at the rate that I used to and the capacities that I used to. And so I've had to learn how to slow down, and there is a beauty in it. And I would say in American culture that we probably lost some of that. I think even you and I, we were talking to the guy from London over the weekend, and him talking about the average vacation time for an employee in England is 6 to 8 weeks. And he jokes about how here it's like 2 weeks. And then he made statements that I was like, oh man, that's me. Where he was like, you Americans, you come out of the hospital and you're already back on email working on stuff at wherever you're employed at. I'm like, oh, you're right. We are, and we do. And I wouldn't say that it's healthy, but I think I've changed too, and just my ability to try and be present. And probably one of the major things that I've learned recently is just the amount of grace people have shown me. My memory is terrible. I repeat myself over and over again. My capacity and energy runs out usually before I know that it has. And when that happens, I get more direct and short and blunt, and probably have a lot of rough edges to, not probably, I know that I have a lot of rough edges to what I say and how I act. And people have been really kind and gracious to me. And we've had so many people just continue to support us. I mean, we're months in now, and I still go back to work when I can. I work from home, but there's people that, they showed up to mow our yard, to fix our cars. They have driven our kids places and taken them. And I think about Rod even coming over to throw the football with the boys.
Taking them fishing,
yeah. Yeah, Nick taking the boys fishing. I think Rod came over and played volleyball with Dakota and Jenny. Anyway, I know I'm throwing out a couple names, but there's so many people who have done so much, and so much support that we've had, and continued messages and cards and people checking up. People that I really don't know from other countries, people from other states that will still Facebook message and tell me that their church is still praying for me on Wednesday nights and they want an update. And, it's just really humbling, and it puts you in a different really in a different place. And I think God's taught us how to, probably better how to care for other people when they go through things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because I think looking at it, it wasn't specifically what people did. It's the fact that they did something. And so I think a lot of times the Lord prompted people to do what we needed, or we had to reach out, which was hard on our part. I think that's the pride part too, where it's just saying like, I don't want to ask for help. But I think as we did, the Lord provided the things that we needed. And, we were robbing people of a blessing to not ask for what we needed because people wanted to help. And so I think one of our learnings going forward is when you feel like you're prompted to do something, do something. It doesn't have to be the right thing.
Yeah, I don't even know if there is always a right thing, but if anything, we've learned to do something. I think about, we have some close friends in California, and when Am was really sick, we were able to take some of the things that we learned. I still think one of the best supplies people gave us was a bunch of paper plates and plastic forks and knives. And I remember whenever we heard what was going on with them, I sent Jason a bunch of paper plates and plastic forks and knives, and he messaged me directly. He was like, "This is amazing, thank you."
Yeah, you just don't realize to take something off their plate.
Well, it's the little things, yeah, and just knowing that someone there is thinking about you. And I think about even when I was in the hospital, close friend, dear friend that's here, and we've been friends longer than we haven't, was nearly about to break into the hospital to try and get things to my room that he wanted me to have, and the nurses stopped him. But, it's just, you feel loved and cared for in times like that, even when nurses are frustrated with some of your best friends.
Yeah.
You're grateful because you're like, yeah, they care about me and they're trying. And even people I'd say that we weren't close to and really barely know. Some people just heard the story and just showed up to support. And so I think that's the biggest thing is just show up, even if you don't know what to do. There might be nothing for us to do. And we've had some of those instances too since I've been home, where we've just gone over to sit with somebody. And sometimes it's sit and cry or listen, or just be in a car where they can see you and they know that you're there.
Yeah, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
So I know people have asked John, will you tell us a little bit about what the COVID recovery has looked like in your
slow
instance?
Slow. That's the word. It's been so slow. Without a doubt, I'm putting myself, my doctors haven't said this, but definitely one of the long haulers, because it's been slow and difficult is what I would say. And we're continuing to try and get connected to other doctors here in the metro that specialize in certain areas that hopefully can help me with recovery, because I've definitely hit some long plateaus is what it feels like in areas I'm not improving. But I mean, coming out of COVID, especially in the hospital, I didn't eat for a long time. And I think I was looking at my records. I think I lost roughly 20 pounds. And so that's a lot. I'm not a super overweight person, and most of that was muscle at that point. So I came home pretty skinny and pretty weak. But then with that is like my anathema of weight gain. Thankfully, I'm back to the same weight I was pre-COVID, but none of it's muscle.
That's okay.
Yeah, because I've been trying to experiment with working out, and so I can work out, and I had some really great workouts for a couple of days, and they felt great, and it just obliterated my body. It took me just days and days and days to recover from that. I mean, to the point that I was back to having to be in bed and sleep a lot and not drive. And so anyway,
your body's saying slow down.
That's right. Yeah. So I keep trying to push at certain times, and we have some great people around us too that have that I know care about me and have had some hard conversations with me about slowing down, and I'm probably doing too much, and maybe that's why I'm not healing. It's I think about the progression of whenever I got home, I couldn't I could barely walk from our living room to our bedroom, which there's no stairs. It's, I don't know, it's probably 30 steps total. And I couldn't go up and down stairs. And as I got stronger, my test would be I would go to the garage. I think it was the garage where there's just one step. And so I would test 1 foot down and then step back into the house. And I'd do that a couple times a day. And then I was able to move to where the back porch was and do 2 steps. I wasn't about to do the steps into the basement because if it went bad, then I was going to end up right back in the hospital. But, it's things like that where it's the small things that you just don't even think about. Being able to shower. I did shower in the hospital, which
you negotiated that shower.
I did negotiate the shower. But it's actually, I had a really good CNA, and I can't remember his name. I think it was Josh. And he came in. I could tell the guy was an athlete. He was young, looked like probably just out of college, and he was. I was like, what sport did you play? He's like, I was a football player. Like, you look like a college football player. And he was the one that would push me. He's like, all right, man, tomorrow we're doing it. I was like, what are we doing? He's like, you're getting up, you're walking. I'm like, well, let's do that. And so he also works as a personal trainer type of exercise science person. And so he was great, and we got along well. And he was the one, which I laugh about it now, thinking he's like, bro, tomorrow you're getting a shower. He's like, you're going to get up, you're going to shower. He's like, I'll help you however you need. And you're going to brush your teeth, we're going to brush your hair. And I got thinking, I was like, I had lost all sense of taste and smell. I had been sweating with 104-degree fever for like 3 days.
It's probably like you reek.
Probably. I was like, it was his own self-interest to get me into the shower. But I needed it, and that was great. And
well, they had told you were going to get a sponge bath.
Which I refused.
Yeah. And so he told you if you eat dinner.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
That he would let you get a shower.
Yeah, he made that deal with me. And if I could stand up, I don't know. Anyway, he had a couple things that were like my reward was getting a shower. And so that's what I mean. The care that I received there, it was excellent, and they took really good care of me. But yeah, the freedom of a shower too was like so good because they had to unhook me from all the machines. And so that was wonderful. But again, to feel like water on my skin, it had been a long time.
Yeah.
And then that was the first time I saw myself in the mirror, and that was not a good experience.
Yeah. I think it's good to remember some of this stuff because when the recovery part feels really slow, for COVID, it's nice to look back and see how far you've come.
Yeah.
You can go down to the basement now to do the basement steps when, I was nervous every time you would go down the steps just because once you didn't have a handhold, you were, you had a lot of dizziness at the beginning.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
So, another question that people have asked is what has the mental, emotional side of your recovery looked like for you?
Yeah, and those are 2 different things for me. The cognitive side has been really, really frustrating. I have a lot of memory issues, and my cognitive side is a lot stronger now than it was when I got home, because my brain just worked really, really slow, and still is. Like nobody, that's kind of a joke at work now when people talk about stuff. I'm like, give me a moment, I have to think about this. And most of my conversations are very disjointed. There's not a lot of continuity to them, which is just kind of where my head's at. And my emails, this is where I say people around me are being super gracious because I had a lot of brain fog. I still have some. It's just not as bad as it was, but the memory stuff is crazy. And I can remember obscure things. Like I can remember
it's true.
Things from, grade school or deep long-term memory, but it's stuff that,
our conversation 5 minutes ago, gone.
It's that kind of stuff and things. And I know it's frustrating for our kids. Like, it's probably frustrating for most of the people around me. Some of us we can laugh at it now, but I know, especially for some of our kids, are like, Dad, we just talked about this an hour ago. And I have to say, well, I wouldn't be asking you if I remembered. So can we do it again? And some of it's been humorous because I think 3 days in a row, I was excited about something, and I went to, I think it was Georgia, our oldest, was like, Georgia, I just thought about this. And I had this whole dialogue. And then the next day I did the same thing. And she thought I was joking. And she's like, really, Dad? Like, what are we talking about? She's like, we had the same conversation yesterday. I was like, well, how did I do yesterday? She's like, you were just as excited and said the exact same thing. I was like, well, it's real. And then it happened on the third day. And she was really frustrated. And I got a kick out of it because I was like, well, hey, I'm pretty consistent then. But that same thing happens at work. And, people will hear me say things over and over again, I know, and our family does. And I'm just grateful for the grace I've received. And I got real frustrated and hit some real hard plateaus. And there were some serious like trigger points for me mentally and emotionally. And I've been spending time with, in particular, I went to one of our counselors because she is really strong when it comes to brain science. And she kind of explained what was happening in my brain and how much rest the brain requires to heal and how much energy it takes to run, that your brain just uses more than the rest of your body is the best way I could say it. But then even her having to break down how to give my brain rest. And some things she told me not to do and some things she told me to do. Like probably don't read books right now, or don't listen to nonfiction books or podcasts, and don't watch television that you're going to get emotionally involved in, because now you're trying to, mentally work through what's happening, and you just need things that will let your mind rest, which I thought was really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You just mentioned your counselor, and I was thinking about, we knew that this experience didn't only leave its mark on you, that it would leave its mark on all of our lives. And so you were probably home for about a week, and we had 2 trained facilitators come over to lead our family through a process group. We just wanted to make sure that we were giving the kids an opportunity to start the process of working through their experience. And for us too, I think we wanted even just a little window into where their hearts were at. I know that, caring for you and the family and starting school, it just felt like it could have gotten pushed under the bed, mm-hmm. And so we just wanted to be really intentional not to do that. I thought it was interesting during that everybody's reaction and experience was so different. Some were sad and some were just relieved.
Yeah, they all had very, very different perspectives. Not that I thought they would all have the same perspective, but it was really interesting to see how each one of them had their own fears around it, or their own, I don't know, unique trauma from that situation. And yeah, I think, like you say, the important thing is I don't think anything can be solved by one counseling session.
No.
Granted, that was a lengthy one and a good one, but I think it did kind of set the stage for future conversations that'll have to be had. And I think as the kids get older and look back on this or relive it, it's going to require them to have their own conversations with their own counselors and their own therapists and team that they have built around them for health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. One of our kids actually was angry at me.
Oh, yeah.
Because I hadn't taken you to the hospital sooner than I did. And I was just thinking the other day about how God had prepared me in advance for that conversation. Mm-hmm. I had a friend who I had to apologize to probably 6 months prior. And she had kind of corrected me on how I had apologized to her, just saying that, if I apologize and then I defend myself afterwards, that it negates the apology. Mm-hmm. And so I remember that going through my head when our daughter was sharing how she was mad at us. And I felt like the Lord had taught me already how to respond to her and just receive, her perspective and to be empathetic with her, but not to defend myself in that space.
Yeah. And you did a good job of it, because I was sitting there, I was already coming up with a defense of like, you had just taken me, whatever, 3 days earlier, and they rejected me. And, I think the same thing would have happened had you taken me sooner, but you did a good job of just letting her talk and be where she was at and owning what you can own and recognizing what she needed in that moment. And I think that's really what that time was, is that everybody needed something different, and it gave us just a little window into what it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What for you, what has your individual work looked like? I guess maybe emotionally healing.
That's broader than just the past couple months. I think we've been very intentional. I know we've been very intentional to work on our mental and emotional health and growth. And so for me, having a couple counselors, therapists, whatever you want to call them, having, in addition to that, mentors and coaches around me that are a season ahead that I can be open and honest with and trust and receive feedback has been needed for me, but especially so coming out of COVID, even more so coming home, has been, I just came home so fragile in so many ways, far beyond the physical, but even the mental side of that. And then the emotional toll, I think, was not, I'm confident it was way more than I had anticipated it to be. And I think I guess I can talk a little bit about like some of the triggers that I have that send me into a tailspin really, really fast. Anything surrounding death, anything with widows or orphan kids, and then anything with hospitals. It's still hard for me. Like sometimes I won't even drive home the fastest route because it takes me past my hospital on that same highway that I could see the van driving, and so from the highway, I see my room every single time. And that's hard for me. And so, there are times I try and avoid it. And which is there's somewhat of a dichotomy here, because like you think about widows and orphans and death and people going through hardships and hospitals, and it's hard to be a pastor and not engage in those things. And I'm grateful for the staff of pastors that are around me, because all of them have gone to those situations and engagements and never even asked me to, because they know where I'm at. They've been doing the funerals and the hospital visits and working with the widows and children who have lost their dads or loved ones. Because I'm crying through it right now.
Yeah. And I think, just to be clear, you're not saying you're not going to ever be at a place where you can do that again. But I think what we've found in our life and in our growth journey is that, God brings things for you to work on as you have the capacity to work through them. And really, you're needing to heal your body in tandem with your heart. And so even down to my soul. And still learning. Like there's still things that happen that will be a trigger that will really throw me off. I was thinking about the movie recently.
Yeah, that's one I was thinking of too. That one's hard to share, but this will probably be part of my healing, just to share with everybody. So I went to that movie. I don't know, it was probably just a couple weeks ago with a group of friends. First time I've been in a movie theater, and definitely since COVID, probably for a couple years now. And it was great. It was great to be with all those guys. It was great to watch a cool movie. And I enjoyed it. And I enjoyed it right up till the end. Because in the end of the movie, the guy dies. Like the hero dies to save his daughter. And the very last scene of the movie is the daughter riding in a car with her mom. And the mom telling this girl about her dad. And I watched that, and I can still see it in my mind's eye. And in the moment, I felt this huge shift and just realized, like, I just moved into this. I was in a total fog, like total haze. I barely remember walking out of the movie theater because I was just in such a haze, and I'm with a group of friends, and there was probably conversations happening, and I was in this total funk and didn't realize. And I think part of that's my cognitive side of I couldn't put together what had just happened to me, but I felt like this zombie just walking out. And then this is crazy. I walk out of the doors, and that sunlight hits you. This was a daytime movie, and the sunlight hits you and you're blind for a moment. And when my eyes adjust, directly across the street is the hospital that I was hospitalized in. And I was just shell-shocked. And, I'm standing there and we're all starting to go to our cars. And I don't think I talked to anybody. Like I saw that hospital and everything just shut down for me. And I don't think any of the guys I was with noticed because, everybody's had a great time with the movie and we got to get in our cars. We got to get to where we're going. And I remember I don't remember walking to my car. I remember getting in the truck and I just sat there and I was dazed enough to know that I probably shouldn't drive at the moment. And so I sat there for a few minutes and then I started driving and I didn't drive home. I drove directly across the street to the hospital and I went back to that staff parking lot that you would park in. And I sat there and I could see my room. Mm-hmm. And I remember just staring at it and crying a lot, praying over it. And then eventually
I saw you on Life 360. I was like, what is he doing at the hospital?
Yeah, I just remember you contacted me.
Yeah.
And I guess I couldn't drive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely been some, what I would call surprises in the healing journey where I think things just come up and you realize, this is something that has parts that I'm going to need to work through. And I know that you will as you're able, and you've always been courageous in the past to lean in to the emotional side of your growth. And so, I just know that that's ahead for you. Yeah. I was thinking about you sitting in the parking lot. And I think one of the things that's come out of this journey is just a soft spot in your heart for the healthcare workers. And
yeah, absolutely.
I'm just curious, what would you want like the listeners to know? Like give them a glimpse of what you feel like you've experienced, and what would you want them to know about maybe the state of the healthcare workers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I would say the doctors and nurses I had were absolutely amazing, and they were completely beat up. There was a point, this is whenever I was in the ER. I think it was just before they were getting ready to transfer me. Well, it wouldn't have been before anyway, it was some point in the ER, and one of my doctors was sitting in a chair, and I remember she was just staring at the ground, and we were talking a little bit, and she was obviously concerned about me. And I was trying to empathize with her, and I obviously at that point it must have been, God just telling me, because I didn't have enough ability to even recognize what was happening, but I do remember this. And I just remember asking her, "Are you okay?" And she was staring at the ground, and she said, "I'm so tired of losing patients." And then she looks up at me with these big welled up eyes, and she says, "And I don't want to lose you." And I just think about, in that moment, I'm patient and pastor to one of my doctors. And I thought, man, what has this woman experienced over how many days? Because she knew I was a pastor. And so I think she let her guard down a little bit with me because she was in a spot that she needed something. And we had some good dialogue after that. But it was a little picture. When you see this like hardcore, big time ER doctor let their guard down for a second to see where they're at and know that it's their tears that are about to hit the floor. Mm-hmm. That was hard. That was hard. And the thing I would say that I would couple with that I didn't put this together until I was just about to go to the PCU, is that while I was in the ER, I kept hearing this like, well, I would say a code, but it was a voice that comes over all the speakers, and it would come over all of them. And it reminds me, like in the military, when there's speakers in the ceiling of every room, so that if there's an announcement, everybody hears it. And I could hear it go through like the different rooms and the hallways. And I don't know how many times I heard it. Probably at least half a dozen while I was in there, if not more, probably more than that. And it wasn't until I started to improve enough that they were going to move me that I had heard it, and I could listen to all the hustle bustle outside my room, and I finally realized what was happening. And I was like, I think there's people dying, and that's everybody rushing to them, and that's why it goes on the loudspeakers. I could be wrong about this, but that's all I could put together. And I just remember praying right then, my God, I don't want to be code whatever that is with that room number. And God, please help those doctors and nurses, because I hadn't been there that long. I'm like, if this is happening that frequently, I can't imagine a 24-hour shift or doing this for an entire week of what was going on. And then it made sense why the doctor said, I'm so tired of losing patients and I don't want to lose you. And so even in my state, I started praying for doctors and nurses, praying for the patient, praying for family members that might be attached to them. And
I was thinking about, you had shared with us, well, maybe not us, but with me, when you were in the PCU, you heard one of the nurses outside your room.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was a sad one as well. So I'm in my room. Obviously, I'm in my bed. This was the middle of the night, and my bed had my head like close to the wall, and there was another room next to me. And obviously, I'm on a COVID floor, and I could tell by the person's cough and their groans and their what stage they were in, because I hadn't been gone from it that far. And so I was laying there, and I could hear the nurse in there, and they got into a pretty loud, and I wouldn't say heated, but very loud discussion. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I could hear the nurse's voice, and it wasn't one that I recognized. And I don't know if she had that patient's door open or what, but as she left that room, she must have been intercepted by several other doctors and nurses that were outside of my door. And I could hear the nurse that was in that room. She seemed angry and sad all at the same time, and I could hear her talking through her tears and in high emotion. And what I gathered was that my neighbor was not following directions. The patient over there, she refused to lay prone. She refused to follow the directions. She refused to do anything that the doctors and nurses were telling her to do. And this nurse was trying to help her. And I could hear her telling the other doctors and nurses in the hallway. And at this point, I wouldn't say she's sobbing, but she's very emotional. And she's like, this woman wants to be an organ donor. And I had to tell her, right now, you have no organs to donate because they're all so beat up from COVID. The only thing we have left is your corneas. Please just lay on your stomach so we can help you. And somebody out there must have been speaking softly because I couldn't hear what they said, but I heard this nurse's reply. And she said, well, I don't want to be the one to have to get the ice bags to put on her cornea when she's dead. And it was just another picture of, man, these people are seeing so much, so frequently, that I don't know how they do what they do. And from a patient perspective, they never showed that to me. They came in, they were smiling, they were kind, they were helpful, and I don't know how they do it with what they lived through. And I don't believe they're calloused, because if they're calloused, they wouldn't keep doing it, and they certainly wouldn't have done their job as well as they did for me in the state that I was in.
Yeah, I think when I hear stories like that, it sometimes feels like there's nothing I can do. There's so many healthcare workers, and I just don't know, what God would want from me. But I was just thinking about what you said, John, and knowing that our prayers do matter. they're making a difference in people's lives. I think, that just convicts me that we do need to pray for them. I know that teachers are struggling now too, and just to make that a focus of our prayers during this time, that they really need the encouragement. They need us to stand in that gap for them.
Yeah, and I would tell you, one, we're doing some stuff at church to try and be an encouragement and a help to medical professionals, and I'm excited to be a part of that. And it's going to have to happen in 2022, but we've got it planned for early in January. And if I could do it for every hospital, doctor and nurse, I would. But you can't get onto the hospital floors to see what they do and hear what they go through. But I think if you want a glimpse that anyone can have, whenever I walked out of that movie and was just completely wrecked by it, and then was sitting in the staff parking lot there at the hospital, I sat there long enough to see people change shifts, and I watched those doctors and nurses come out, and some of them got a little distance from the hospital, and then they just started crying, and I watched them cry all the way to their car and get in their car, and I prayed for each one of them as I saw them. And some of them have their regimen where they have what look like a plastic tub where they take their shoes and put it in there. They'll take their scrubs and put it in there. I'm guessing because they don't want to take whatever those germs are home. And you watch some of them that they walk to their car and not everybody's crying on the way to their car, but they get in their car, and some of them just sat there. They sat there for minutes, and they weren't on their phone. They're not checking Facebook. And I was just trying to think about, I wonder what they saw today. I wonder what they lived through today. And I know what you're doing in your car, because sometimes I do this before I come home, is I have to move myself into a space where I can come home and be dad, or be husband, or be friend, or whatever it is. And for them, they have to take a moment and decompress, maybe push to the side a little bit what they experienced that day. And that's the world that they continue to live in. We still continue to do funerals for people who are dying from COVID, and it's not done, and it's hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So thankful for them.
Yeah.
How they took care of you. I was thinking this experience has made us also so thankful for the second chance and our marriage. Being married for 21 years, I think there were areas of our marriage that we were stuck in a rut, and we just didn't even see it until we thought we were going to lose each other. And
I'd say our lives, yes, marriage, but also our lives. There's ruts that we would go back to, or things that well-worn paths that we would are easier and that were comfortable or well known. And I think we've changed a lot of that.
Yeah, I agree. How do you see yourself living differently moving forward?
I am doing my best to live without any regrets. I do have a second chance at everything. And some of the things I've tried to do now is I say what I need to say when I feel like I need to say it, and to the people that I need to say it to. And sometimes that's encouragement, sometimes that's love, sometimes that's feedback, or sometimes that's leaning into some really uncomfortable conversations of where I might be in a relationship with somebody. I would say I'm not trying to hold back on any domain right now of my life. If it's love, I want it to be expressed openly and freely and frequently. If it's care, if it's words of affirmation, if it's following through on things that I said I was going to do. Before I had COVID, we had one of our daughters wanted a barn cat. I had said we were going to get a barn cat, and we didn't get a barn cat for a while because I couldn't. Mm-hmm. And so whenever I was healthy enough, we got a barn cat. And, it's just stuff like that. I've learned how to play catch with a football from a chair on the porch because I'm not always strong enough to stand up or run with the boys. And I'm just trying to be present as often as I can. I'd say that's probably the biggest thing, is just trying to be present with the people I care about and whatever's going on. Watching movies. Dakota had a series of movies she wanted to watch, and so I watched the movies with her. And playing games. Like, I think about like the dice game. Tensies. It's not always easy for me to want to get down on the floor and play the game, but it's fun, and I don't want to miss out on opportunities. And having a second chance at the things that are important to me is something that I value, and I'm trying to intentionally choose not to squander those opportunities. And one thing, I got Disney Plus when I got home, and me and the boys watched all the Star Wars movies, all of them, and the ones in between. And I think about the quote from Yoda where he says, "Do or do not, there is no try." And that's what I feel like I have to do, and I'm going to. And I've gotten a lot more clarity about myself, about who I am, because when you go through something like this, it brings you down to your irreducible minimums. And I think if you pay attention and you can grab those, then I know who I am, what I'm supposed to do, and I'm going to go do exactly that.
Yeah. Well, babe, I really appreciate you sharing your story and your experience. And I know a lot of you have listened to us talk for hours now.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah. So if you've listened to all 4 episodes, I guess we just hope that you're blessed or encouraged in some way by hearing our journey. And we just want you to know we feel really grateful for you and your investment, your care, and your prayers for us and our family during this time.
Yeah, we do.
And we're just really grateful for a second chance to love and to enjoy family.